Hello dear students, welcome to this online video lecture. Myself Pawar MA from SGM College, Karad. I am conducting here these video lectures under the Rayat Online School Education, that is the ROSE project. I am conducting here fourth lecture from biology. The topic is plant growth and mineral nutrition. So we start. In the last lecture, we studied the photoperiodism, vernalization, growth hormones, etc. Now, today's lecture we start. Next point is mineral nutrition. So, plant absorb water gases, mineral nutrients, etc. from surroundings. Green plants, for the synthesis of their organic food, need inorganic substances or elements which are obtained from soil in the form of minerals. Next, mineral constituent most commonly occurring solid inorganic materials obtained from the earth crust. Next, chemical analysis of plant ash clearly indicates the plant absorb mineral elements from surroundings, soil, air and water for its uses. Moves to the next slide. About 36 to 40 different elements periodic table are used as a mineral by the plants. These are absorbed in ionic or dissolved form as a PO4, CO3, SO4, etc. usually throughout roots, region of elongation and growth. Moves to the next slide. Sources of minerals. These are the sources of minerals. Plants derive necessary elements from the atmosphere, soil and water. Carbon enters the plant as atmospheric carbon dioxide. Sources of hydrogen is water and oxygen comes from air and water. Carbon, hydrogen and oxygen are not mineral in origin. Sources of nitrogen is the soil. Plant derives nitrogen from both mineral and non-mineral origin. Moves to the next slide. Classifications of minerals. Earlier, on the basis of their requirement, minerals were classified as essential and non-essential. Essential minerals are those that are indispensable, without which plant cannot complete their life cycle. Example: CHONP, etc. means carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen and phosphorus, etc. These elements play structural and physiological roles. Their absence can produce or causes major deficiency symptoms. The non-essential elements are not indispensable and they do not produce or causes any deficiency symptoms. Moves to the next slide. The classification is absolute now. Based on the quantity requirement, minerals are classified as a minor or micro element, major or macro element. These are the micro element. Micro elements are required in traces because they function in the catalytic roles. Examples: zinc, copper, aluminium, etc. as cofactors. Or silicon. Macro elements are required in a large quantity. They mainly play in nutritive and structural roles. Example: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, magnesium, nitrogen, potassium and sulfur, etc. So, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen are non-mineral major elements. This classification is not accepted now. Moves to the next slide. Nowadays, minerals are classified on the basis of their biochemical functions. Symptoms of minerals deficiency in plants. Any visible deviation from the normal structure and the function of the plant is called a symptom or hunger sign. The concentration of the essential elements below which plant growth is retarded is termed as a critical concentration. The element is said to be a deficiency when present below the critical concentration. Moves to the next slide. Certain morphological changes are inductive of the deficiency of particular element. Deficiency symptoms also depend on the mobility of the element in the plants. The deficiency symptoms appear first in young tissues when elements are relative immobile, example sulfur and calcium. When the elements are actively mobilized within the plants and exported to young developing tissues, the deficiency symptoms are visible first in the older tissues, example nitrogen, magnesium and potassium. Moves to the next slide. Some important deficiency symptoms seen in plants are stunting. The growth is retarded, the stem appears condensed and short. Chlorosis. It is the loss of non-development of chlorophyll resulting in the yellowing of leaves. Next, necrosis. It is the localized death of tissue of leaves. Mottling. Appearance of green and non-green patches on the leaves. And abscission means premature fall of flowers, fruits and leaves. These are some important deficiency symptoms seen in the plants. Moves to the next slide. The chart shows roles of minerals, elements in plants. So, these are the elements, region of plants which required for their functions and deficiency symptoms. First is nitrogen. Their region of plant in which required is everywhere, particularly in meristematic tissue. Function is constituent of proteins, nucleic acid, vitamins, hormones, coenzymes, ATP and chlorophyll. The deficiency symptom is stunted growth and chlorosis. Second element is phosphorus. These are the region of plant in which required younger tissues obtained from older metabolically less active cells. There is functions constituent of cell membrane, certain proteins, all nucleic acids and nucleotides required for all phosphorylation reactions, and their deficiency is poor growth, leaves dull green. Third element is potassium. Their region of plant in which required meristematic tissues, buds, leaves, root tips, and their function helps in determining anion cations balance in cell involved in protein synthesis, involved in formation of cell membrane and in opening of closing of stomata, increasing hardness, activates enzyme and helps in maintenance of turgidity of cell, and their deficiency symptoms yellow edges to leaves, premature death. Next, calcium, meristematic and differentiating tissues accumulates in older leaves. Their functions involved in selective permeability of cell membranes, active certain enzymes required for development of stem and root apex as a calcium pectate in the middle lamella of the cell wall. Next, deficiency symptoms is stunted growth. Next element is magnesium. There is region of plant in which required leaves withdrawn from aging leaves and exported to a developing seed. Functions: activates enzyme in phosphate metabolism constituent of chlorophyll, maintains ribosome structure, and their deficiency symptoms is chlorosis. Next element is sulfur. Stem and root tips, young leaves remobilized during senescence. Their functions: constituent of certain proteins, vitamins, and pyridoxine. The deficiency symptoms is chlorosis. Next element is iron. Everywhere carries along leaf veins. Functions: constituent of pyridoxine and cytochrome, activate catalase required for synthesis of chlorophyll, and their deficiency symptom is chlorosis. These are the role of minerals in elements in plants. Next slide. The magnesium, it is an element. So leaves and seeds, their functions: activate certain enzymes, and deficiency symptom is chlorosis, gray spot on leaves. The element is molybdenum, boron, copper, zinc, and chlorine. So molybdenum is everywhere, particularly in roots, activate certain enzymes in the nitrogen metabolism, and the deficiency symptom is slight retardations of growth. Next, boron, and their deficiency symptoms is brown heart disease. Copper is deficiency symptom, die back of shoot. Zinc deficiency symptom is malformed leaves, and chlorine, there is deficiency symptom is poor growth of the plant. And the functions of the boron is required to uptake of utilization, pollen germination, and cell differentiation, carbohydrate translocation. Copper is activates certain enzymes. Zinc function is activates various enzymes, especially carboxylase, part of carbonic anhydrase, and the various dehydrogen is needed for oxygen synthesis. And chlorine, there is function with Na plus and Ka plus, helps in determining solute concentration of anion cation balance in cell, essential for oxygen evolution in photosynthesis. These are the roles in element in plant. Moves to the next slide. Toxicity of micronutrients. Mineral ions concentrations which reduces the dry weight of tissues by 10% is considered as a toxic. Toxicity of one element may inhibit the uptake of other. Example, Mn competes with FeMg or uptake the but inhibits Ca, calcium translocation, the shoot apex. Thus, Mn toxicity develops deficiency symptoms of calcium and magnesium and ferrous. Next, mineral salt absorption. Most minerals in the soil are charged particles, hence they cannot pass across the membrane. Hence, most of the minerals are absorbed actively with the expenditure energy. Next, minerals can also be absorbed passively without expenditure of energy. And mineral ion absorption is independent of water absorption. Moves to the next slide. Mineral ion absorption can occur in two ways. Passive absorption. First is passive absorption. Movement of mineral ions into the root occurs by diffusion. Molecules or ions diffuse from a region of their higher concentration to a region of their lower concentration. The movement of mineral ions into root cell as a result of diffusion is without expenditure of energy is called a passive absorption. It is a very important definition. The movement of mineral ions into a root cell as a result of diffusion is without expenditure of energy is called as a passive absorption. Or passive absorption can take place by direct ion exchange in a direct ion exchange mass flow and Donan equilibrium. Modes to the next slide. Second is Donan equilibrium. It is based on the assumption that certain negatively charged ions after their entry into the cell become fixed on inner side of the cell membrane and cannot diffuse outside throughout the cell membrane. Therefore, additional mobile cations are required to balance their fixed anions. Obviously, concentrations of cations become more due to a accumulation. The kind of passive absorptions anions cation from the cell exterior against their own concentration gradients in order to neutralize the effect of cations anions is called a Donan equilibrium. Modes to the next slide. Active absorption. First is passive absorption and next is active absorption. Uptake of mineral ion against concentration gradient is called active absorption. Such movement require an expenditure of energy by the absorbing cell. This energy is derived from respiration and supplied throughout ATP means adenosine triphosphate. When the root are deprived of oxygen, they show the sudden drop in active absorptions of minerals. The mineral ions accumulate in the root hair, pass into the cortex and finally reaches the xylem. Modes to the next slide. The mineral in the xylem the carried along with water to other part of the plant along the transpiration stream and are subsequently assimilated into organic molecules and then redistributed to other parts of the plant throughout the phloem. Moves to the next slide. Next point is nitrogen cycle. The last point in this topic, nitrogen cycle. It is the series of natural processes by which nitrogen enters successively from air to organism through a soil and back to a environment. Plant use photosynthetic product, the sugar to make proteins. To do this, they need nitrogen. Unfortunately, it is a very inert. Plant need nitrogen in a reactive forms, usually as a nitrate ions. Moves to the next slide. This is a nitrogen cycle. So, nitrogen gas makes up to 78% of our atmosphere. Nitrogen is also a part of many molecules essential to life like proteins, nucleic acids, or DNA, RNA, and some vitamins. The atmospheric nitrogen, these are the atmospheric nitrogen, is converted into ammonia and ammonia converted into nitrates and the nitrites. These are the nitrogen fixing bacteria. There is fixing a nitrogen and the nitrogen is found in other biological important compounds such as the alkaloids and urea too. Nitrogen is thus essential nutrient for all life forms. These are the nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen fixing bacteria, its atmospheric nitrogen is converted into ammonia or ammonia converted into a nitrates and the nitrates converted into a nitrites. Moves to the next slide. Nitrogen is a limiting nutrient in the agricultural ecosystem. It exists the nitrogen atoms with a strong triple covalent bond. It is nitrogen triple covalent bond and nitrogen. A regular supply of nitrogen to the plants is maintained through biological and physiological processes. Moves to the next slide. Nitrogen fixation. Atmosphere is the sources of nitrogen. It can cannot be used directly. It combines with carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen to form compounds before being used. Conversion of free nitrogen of the atmosphere into a nitrogenous salt to make it available for the plants is called as a nitrogen fixation. It is of two types, physical and biological fixation. Nitrification. Most of the soil bacteria participate in the converting ammonia into a nitrate, the form of nitrogen which can be used by plants and animals. This involves two steps performed by two different types of bacteria. First, soil bacteria convert ammonia into a nitrogen dioxide, example Nitrosomus and Nitrococcus, etc. The biological nitrogen fixation. It is carried out by prokaryotes called as a nitrogen fixers or disotropes. It accounts nearly 70% of natural nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixers are either symbiotic or free-living. They cyanobacteria fix significant amount of nitrogen in specialized cell called as a heterocyst. Nitrogen fixation is high energy requiring processes and nitrogen fixes uses 16 molecules of ATP to fix each molecule of nitrogen to form ammonia. There is N2 plus 8H plus 8E minus plus 16 ATP is converted into 2NH3 plus H2 plus 16 ADP plus 16 Pi. Ammonia is converted into amino acids. Moves to the next slide. So, ammonia group is converted into a nitrates or nitrites. These are the reaction of the ammonia or nitrogen fixing atmospheric nitrogen fixes. The another type of soil bacterium called as a nitrovector adds a third oxygen atom to create a nitrate. So, 2HNO2 plus O2 is converted into a 2HNO3 is presence of the nitrobacter. These bacteria are chemoautotrophs. By metabolizing nitrogen along with oxygen, they obtain energy to power their own life processes. Moves to the next slide. Symbiotic nitrogen fixation. The best known nitrogen fixing symbiotic bacterium is the rhizobium. This soil living or dwelling bacterium forms root nodules in plants belonging to family Fabaceae, example beans, grams, groundnut, and etc. Moves to the next slide. Ammonification. After the death of plants and animals, various fungi, actinomycetes, and some ammonifying bacteria decompose the tissue of convert organic nitrogen into amino acids and then to ammonia and back into a ecosystem. Ammonia is now available uptake by plants and other microorganisms for growth. Proteins in the presence of converted into amino acids, microbial and decomposition, and amino acids converted into NH3 plus ROH means ammonia or organic acid. Moves to the next slide. Nitrogen assimilation. In soil, nitrogen is present as nitrates or nitrites and ammonia. It is absorbed by the green plants and converted to nitrogenous organic compounds like amino acids, DNA, etc. This is known as a nitrogen assimilation. From plants, nitrogen as biomolecules like amino acids enters food chain and moves to animal and then to decomposers through the death of animals. Moves to the next slide. Nitrates are first converted to ammonia, but it is highly toxic and immediately used to conversion into amino acids which are then transported to other part of the plants for synthesizing of proteins. NO3 plus 2E minus plus 2H is converted into NO2 plus H2O, and the next reaction is NO2 minus plus 8E minus plus 8H plus is converted into a NH4 plus 2H2O. Moves to the next slide. Amino acid synthesis. Amino acids are building block of proteins. The amino acids are synthesized throughout. Reductive aminations. Ammonia reacts with alpha ketoglutarate acid to form glutamic acid. Alpha ketoglutarate acid plus NH4 means ammonia plus NADPH2. Glutamate dehydrogenase and glutamate plus H2O plus NADP. Transmination. Amino group of one amino acid is transferred to keto position of other carboxyl acid, glutamic acid plus oxaloacetate acid. It is a glutamate asparatate and amino transferase in the presence of alpha ketoglutarate acid plus aspartic acid. Moves to the next slide. Amides. Ammonia may be absorbed by amino acid to produce amides. The process is called as a amidation. The amides are the amino acids having two amino groups. Extra amino group is attached to acidic group in the presence of ATP. The reaction of glutamic acid plus NH4 plus ATP is converted into alpha glutamine plus ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and the aspartic acid is plus converted into a asparagine plus ADP. Moves to the next slide. Amides like asparagine and the glutamic are formed from glutamic acid and aspartic acid respectively by addition of another amino group to each. Amides are transported to other parts of plants, xylem and vessels. Denitrification. Next point is denitrification. It is the process in which a anaerobic bacterium can convert soil nitrates back into a nitrogen gas. Denitrifying bacteria removes fixed nitrogen, that is the nitrates, from the ecosystem and return into a atmosphere in inert form. Moves to the next slide. Denitrifying bacteria includes Bacillus species, Paracoccus species, and the Pseudomonas denitrificans. They transform nitrates to nitrous and nitric oxides and ultimately to gaseous nitrogens. The reaction is 2NO2 converted into 2NO2, converted into 2NO and converted into N2. Next, last point is sedimentation. The nitrates of the soil are washed away to the sea or leached deep into the earth along with percolating water. So, in this lecture, we study the 13 points in this topic. These are the plant growth, phases of growth, condition for growth, growth rate and types of growth, growth curve, differentiation, redifferentiation and dedifferentiation, development, plasticity, growth hormones. These are the growth hormones are ethylene, abscisic acid, gibberellin, cytokinin, etc. Photoperiodism, vernalization, mineral nutrition, and last point is nitrogen cycle. And this nitrogen cycle we study the atmospheric nitrogen In the presence of nitrogen fixing bacteria is converted into ammonia. Ammonia is converted into nitrites and nitrites converted into a nitrates. These are the nitrogen cycle. So, thank you.